Hello. Okay, I want to do a quick video about the Shemitah years. What are they? You might be asking. Well, I am not even part of this religion, but I've got to say, the more I look into it, it's super weird. I don't know. Don't want to explain it in terms of like why it happens, but it does happen. And the Shemitah years are a Jewish tradition going back into like biblical times where every 7 years they are supposed to forgive all debts and leave their crops and things fallow. So their land goes fallow, they let everything rest, they wipe off debts, forgive all debts, and so on. And it seems subconsciously to have imprinted itself on humanity in the economies and in the stock markets and in the finance sector. And it's just really interesting. So, what are we looking at here? This is the S&P 500 dating all the way back to 1930. But before we get back there, I just want to go to some area that we remember quite recently, which is 2022. 2022 was a Shemitah year. You might recall that we dropped quite a lot, and that was all due to interest rates and inflation and so on. But funnily enough, September 2021 was the beginning of a Shemitah year, and we made a top. In fact, I remember very clearly in 2021 that was when the Fed announced that the money's running out, the stimulus is ending in Q1, and from that moment onwards, we were going to go down. So it was textbook uh, Shemitah. Now, so that's just one data point. So what, you might be saying? That's not a trend. But then you go back here and you look at 2014. 2014 was a Shemitah year. We made a rounding top from September, and then in the months or the year that followed, we collapsed pretty significantly. I think this one is around about a 15% S&P 500. So there are mini Shemitahs, and that's why some of these lines are small. So everyone was freaking out in 2022, but really when you look into it, this Shemitah was a drop of 27%, pretty decent, but it can get a lot worse, okay? It can get a lot worse, as you will see. Uh, the '07 Shemitah was pretty drastic. I think this was a 50% drawdown. Again, from the ninth month, it's always the ninth month. So September 2027, sorry, 2007, my bad. And we dropped a good 50% that time. That was pretty bad. Okay, but in all these cases, the reason why, even though a 50% drawdown, a 15% drawdown, a 27% drawdown, I've only put in these light lines is because we did, in the years that followed, recover and make a new all time high. Okay, granted, this '07 one did take a little longer. It wasn't until 6 years later. So this was a pretty drastic one. Okay. Um, but the reason for it you're about to see. Okay. So this thick line here, the daddy line, this is the one in every 35 years Shemitah. So it seems weird, but every 7 years we have a Shemitah, and every 5 of those 7 years we get to the 35-year cycle. And that Shemitah is a doozy. It's one that has long lasting impacts for many years afterwards. So the 2000 September 2000 was a Shemitah year. It started a Shemitah year, and we had a nice big drawdown of 50%. But the market went sideways for a good decade. All right, roughly a decade, right into the next Shemitah. And that is why the next one following it was pretty bad. These other ones, well and truly between the 35-year cycle, not so bad. Okay, recovery a year later, even the 2022 one, we recovered. Obviously, I remember here Gareth Soloway and others were saying, "Oh, this no new all-time high for 10 years." He was early, way early, and you'll see how early. I think that's not going to happen until 2035 onwards. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Now, going back further, September 93, a mini Shemitah year. It doesn't look like we even had one, but let's zoom right in here. And you can see that it started in September. We made a top in the months that followed, and then we had a nice big, pretty mini 10% drawdown. The ones before that, okay, so here we had 86. The Shemitah began. Fair enough. We had another whole year of good times, but then I guess life caught up with us and fate and whatever you want to call it and said, wait a minute, this is a Shemitah year. And it dropped us the whole 35%. So this would have been a tricky time for people aware of Shemitahs going, hang on a minute, how are we making new all-time highs? Where's the correction? And sure enough, it came. It was just late. This one, similar sort of thing. So what I want you to take away is the beginning of the Shemitah year is not necessarily the top. In fact, it rarely is. It could go fairly into another few months before it corrects. So this one, I mean, it was declared a Shemitah year in September 79, and we didn't make a local top until February 80, and then that drew down 20%. Pretty decent for a Shemitah year. Now, this one is another one of those huge sideways ones, which I'll skip the 72 and just go straight to the 65, but you'll see. So the 65 is one of those once in every 35-year Shemitahs. So we had our normal 20% drawdown, but this marked the start of a very tumultuous time that again spanned, well, more than a decade before we made a new all-time high. I mean, we made new all-time highs, but it's basically a 10-year period of sideways chop. And you can see again here a 10-year period of sideways chop with, yes, maybe some all-time highs and whatever, but this 10-year period of sideways chop is horrible. Not that I've lived through one yet, but we will. And it's not coming up soon. So going back to today, you can see that the next Shemitah year is not due until September 2028. Okay, it doesn't mean that we can't have corrections in the meantime. Obviously, we had COVID, but COVID being a V-shaped recovery, it was not a Shemitah year. So within 6 months, we recovered from that. Really? Actually, was it even? So we had February 2020, and we made new all-time high in, 3 months later. So 4 months later. So very much a blip. So if basically the takeaway I want you to have from here is any correction we have between the Shemitahs is very likely to be a V-shaped recovery. All the people who are calling for end of the world, oh, this is the beginning of a huge bear market. No, I mean, it could be a technical bear market, but it'll be short lived. Okay. So any dips you buy until we get to the area here. And what I've imprinted here is different Shemitah year bar patterns. And you can see that from about this moment onwards, in the year leading up to the beginning of the Shemitah, it can diverge and become quite choppy, but the real corrections happen shortly afterwards. In the months that follow from the Shemitah being declared. So I would say start to be cautious, certainly in the year of September 2027 onwards. Start to be cautious, position yourself, because in September 2028, the 9th month, every 7 years, we're going to have a big correction. But I don't think that that's going to be the 10 years of chop correction. I don't. That is due in September 2035, which we'll all be around for. I do think, though, that this September 28 one is going to be nasty because it is part of the Strauss-Howe generational cycle theory, which is another completely different cycle, but it just so happens to be on top of the Shemitah occurring. So 2028 to 2032 will be a Strauss-Howe generational cycle final turning event. Go and look that up separately. I don't have time to talk about it today, but it does imprint over the exact same time as does the end of the property market cycle every 18 and a half years. So there's a lot that's going to go wrong here. But again, I do think that it might take, till the 2032s for us to really start having golden times again. But we will. we will see this September 31 and onwards. I think we'll be going all the way up. We'll